Well, hello and welcome everybody to Flicker Effect. In this episode, we are going to be discussing the latest episode of The Acolyte over on Disney Plus. Episode 7 just dropped earlier tonight, and we are going to talk about it, spoilers and all. But first, I'm Dave Lotz. Joining me is Bobby Jackson. How's it going, Bobby?
Good. This is the first time we've actually done a review right after the episode is aired of anything that I can think of, honestly.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I feel like maybe Michelle and I once did like a reaction to something like right after it aired. But yeah, for the most
Okay.
part, I think this is really the first time we've like jumped on and done a very quick reaction to something we've watched. Yeah, or at least it's been a while. But anyway, yeah, episode 7 just dropped. Yep, I just finished watching it a few minutes ago and jumped on here, and let's get into it. Again, I'm going to give the warning. This is going to be our spoiler thoughts. So if you haven't watched the episode yet, just so you know, we are going to most likely talk spoilers and ruin aspects of the episode. So you have been warned. Bobby, yeah, real quick. You just watched it. What did you think?
So, going into this episode, I think I mentioned it off air and through text that this episode I had heard through the grapevine it was going to be another flashback episode. And sure enough, that's what it was. It goes back and tells the story from the perspective of the Jedi when they land on the planet where Osha and May are, and tells how they got to the point where we see them at eventually where Osha is taken off planet. And it's weird because normally I think there's enough time within the time we record and the time I've seen something to fully digest something.
All
So
right.
it's different in this way that I haven't fully digested it. But all I can say is after watching the episode, one, I'm happy that they finally gave answers to everything and kind of laid the whole story out there for us to see where we're going to go with this final episode next week. But the second thing that I can't help but say is that I felt depressed kind of honestly after watching the episode. It's a weird feeling. It's just, I felt like this sadness in that episode just because of how badly everything went, how much they messed things up, specifically Soul along the way in terms of everything that he was doing was out of step in terms of what Endora was saying and the way he should behave as a Jedi, and just his brashness and just doing things that was unbecoming of a Jedi to a certain degree. And that's I'm not negating it for doing that and saying, oh, he's a bad Jedi and they shouldn't show that. I like that they are showing that there are Jedi that are like that aren't always the best, and Jedi are still at the end of the day emotional people or creatures or whatever, that they still have feelings and they don't always contain those feelings and can't always be quote unquote good. And so sometimes it's like it's interesting from that perspective to see a story told of a Jedi not at their best and doing some things and making mistakes. And so from that perspective, it's like, okay, it's fresh storytelling is giving you a different perspective on the Jedi and a way that we don't always see them in that light. That being said, it was just like, oh man, it felt terrible to see them constantly making these mistakes that led to such a disastrous outcome. And so to see now the full fallout from that in the next episode will be interesting because you already can see from our viewpoint as the audience how things went down. So I can only imagine if and when Soul gets to tell this story to May or Osha, how that will be perceived. And at this point, I could easily see how this could tip the balance for someone like Osha to now go to the dark side when she finds out that Soul killed her mom, and that just caused these chain of events to happen. So yeah, I mean, overall, if I just gave like a feeling towards the episode in general, I liked it. I thought that it did well in telling and tying up the loose ends that they had and the threads that were out there to be able to say, okay, this is definitively what happened, and now we know, and now we're going to conclude this whole story in terms of this all coming to a head within the next episode.
Yeah, like you said, it's different. Sharing thoughts on something you haven't had time to like digest and think about more thoroughly. So my quick reaction to this episode is I did not like it as an episode of television. um, it felt like, for one, that the show was all. It was like I was watching a fast forwarded version of the scene. Is what the editing felt like to me. Like the story they were trying to tell could have been told over the course of and this is going to sound like a broken record as we've talked about the show, but it's felt like a story that should have been told over the course of like an hour or more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been like condensed to what was, I think, in the end, one of the sadly longer episodes of The Acolyte. But even still, it felt way too short for what it was trying to do. And yeah, I didn't really care for it. And, you know, as a Star Wars fan and watching the story, it is interesting seeing, like, as you said, like, there's not all Jedi are like these kind of perfect people that we have sometimes seen, like in maybe previous movies and such. But I don't know. There's still choices made by this group of four Jedi that we see here that just give, even with what we're given, doesn't make sense to me. Like, for instance, Carrie Ann Moss's character, whose name is escaping me right now.
Endura, I think.
Yeah, like I don't know. Right at the end, just how quickly she's like, "Yep, we're gonna tell the council this, and that's what we're gonna do." And
So you don't buy her reasoning for why
no,
she's going to? Okay.
I think the reasoning that's given is what mostly about OSHA, right? That if we
Yeah.
tell the truth, also OSHA will be heard and hurt,
Mm-hmm.
and you brought her with us, or she's with us, so now why do that? Why don't
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't buy that
Hmm.
reasoning that she would suddenly go, yep, we're gonna lie to the council, and all because of this kid who I didn't even think we should be bringing here in the first place. It just doesn't, that doesn't make sense to me, again, with what we're given in the story. And yeah, like, I guess, you know, as someone who hasn't consumed as much of the kind of other material in Star Wars, especially the books and such, I haven't seen as many Jedi making very questionable decisions as I've seen in this episode. And it is a little weird for me. Like, I'm not saying I think all Jedi should be portrayed in this, like, perfect kind of being way. I don't know. Like, but still, even the Padawan, and I guess I get that he's a Padawan in this episode, but like his like nonstop, like, I want to go back to Coruscant. It just, I don't know. That's, even that whole thing was just like, really, like, this Padawan is like constantly whining about wanting to go home. And so much so that he's like, oh, if we get the kids or whatever, you know, he rushes off back to the
Yeah.
witches with this, basically only with the intention of like, well, then we can go home. I'm like, really? Like, I don't know. It didn't work for me. Again, I know my thoughts aren't very well like spelled out, I think, because we just watched this, but yeah, I would say I think this is my least favorite episode yet. Even thinking back to episode 5, was it, that I really did? No, 4. Episode 4, which I really didn't care for either.
Mm.
I I found, even though it was nice to get answers because we've been waiting so long to find out what happened.
Yeah.
Even so, the way they told the story, I didn't like. I would say this is probably my least favorite episode yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would probably say the last episode is still my least favorite. You know, I think the answers for me, while I think it's still the story of it could have been better explained in a longer episode. I was pretty much, I don't know. I think I felt like the answers they provided were pretty much along the lines of what I imagined in my head to a certain degree of how things went down. Not necessarily to the same level of detail, but just sort of broad strokes. So I think it just kind of help fill in that information gap. And so I think outside of just some of the other questionable things within the episode, as far as the different ways that some of these characters are acting, um, yeah, I think still, I just like the fact that we got to this point where, okay, it's all been laid out for us. And in my head, makes sense for the way they've been telling these stories so far in this show in terms of like uh, almost in a shorthand sort of way. Yeah, I think I've almost grown accustomed to their shorthand instead of being able to tell longer format stories and being able to really give you more in that. In a sense, it makes it feel like Game of Thrones within the last few episodes of the season 8, where it's just kind of like, okay, there's a lot of shorthand going on here.
Mm.
So it's like, okay, I see where they would be able to go with more time, but I buy enough of what they're selling to be able to go along with it. So I think that's why ultimately I did like it more so than you're feeling it right now.
Oh no, I'm glad you did. I'm so the opposite. It's fact, the more I'm sitting here thinking about it, the more I'm like, man, I just found that to be really bad television. And it's frustrating because of,
Yeah.
again, all the discourse about this show. And I was thinking back to episodes 1 and 2, like,
Hmm.
and thinking, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the beginning of this series and was like, all right, like, I think this is promising. And I'm saying that, and I think we've got one episode left, and it could be great. And
Hmm.
maybe after this last episode, overall, I'll feel very positive about the Acolyte. But as it stands, you know, in a lot of ways, the show, well, I wouldn't even say the show has gone like just downhill. It's been
Hmm.
very just kind of all over the
Yeah.
place for
Roller
me.
coaster.
I'm, even though there's things I did not like about episode 6, I overall enjoyed that episode. This episode felt like the opposite of 6 in a lot of ways. Like it just, no, it was nice to see where we stand, and it was nice to finally get the story of, the other side of the story as to what happened, on, what was it, Brendock? Is that his name of the
I
planet?
think so. Yeah.
But yeah, it's the way the show is edited, and then also character choices that just don't make sense with what we're given for me.
Hmm.
I don't know, man. It's tough. Like, this show is so
Uh,
weird. I, that's
yeah.
all I
Yeah,
got.
it
Like,
is. Yeah, I mean, even that's what makes it hard, I guess. In that when you take out all the noise of surrounding the show, you just look at the show in and of itself. There's just a lot of not great writing going on, not
mm-mm.
a lot of great way in pacing. It's just there's a lot of mistakes. But again, there's, like I said last week when we talked about it, there's good things within it. So I still think that I'm I'm maybe slightly like on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd say I'm at a 6 with the show right now. So we'll see based on the final episode and how it wraps up where that takes me. But
Right.
yeah, it's like I'm just hovering above the middle, of the range. So we'll see.
Yeah, maybe I'd put myself at a 5. Like,
Okay. Yeah. I can
um,
see that.
I'm overall interested in the story, just I find that at times it's poorly told, and at other
Yeah.
times it's actually I find kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
But uh, that's kind of where I am right now. It will be very, very interesting to watch the finale and see how it plays out and how much it ends in a cliffhanger,
Hmm.
especially for a
Hmm.
show that we may not ever see another season for again.
Yeah.
Like I do wonder how much it will end in a cliffhanger kind of style, or will it truly end in a way that, hey, yep, nope, we made this like this is it. I
Yeah. I'm
I
hoping it's that way.
I
That.
hope it.
Yeah. I don't know. It's tough just because I kind of want it to just end and that be the rest. I mean, that's it. We don't. There's no more seasons because I would hope that it was envisioned as just this one story. Even though I've heard the showrunner say that they could see where it could go into a second season or even more than that. I just feel like if you can't improve upon the quality of the show, then there's no reason to keep going further with it. And
Yeah.
so I will take what I get with this and let's call it a day. If they can't do anything to make it better, as far as length of the show, the writing of the show, all those different aspects have to go up and above beyond where it's at now for there to be a genuine interest in a second season for me. But I will. That will also be determined based on what we get in this final episode next week.
Yeah. Yeah. Come the final episode, we will no doubt be able to share our final thoughts on this series. And I mean, we could go in any direction, I feel,
Yeah,
from
really.
there.
Yeah.
Who knows? Any other thoughts on this one?
Not really. Um, I am curious because at that one point where we see the witches have taken control of Kalnaka, and um, they're in their trance and they're doing their thing against him. And then when Endura comes over and she gets him, breaks the trance, but in breaking the trance, I guess kills all those witches.
I
I
guess.
didn't. Yeah, I guess I don't know, like some sort of almost like force pushback or something. I don't know what it was, but um, I didn't see the other mother. Did you?
The one who kind of turned into
The
the
one with the
black
horns.
vapor.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I think the episode seemed to very purposely, like, make it questionable about what happens to her.
Yeah.
So, and then yeah, are they really dead? I would say I don't know. Are they just like
Hmm.
passed out from whatever just happened, and then they could
Right.
die in this burning stone building?
Yeah. Pretty. Yeah. It's even more horror.
Yeah, I don't know, but it does seem obvious that we could see a reemergence of her character in the finale. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I would be kind of surprised at this point if they don't like tie up that loose end of what happened to her.
Yeah.
So, otherwise, I
If
think
sh
we would have seen her die or something
right
more
on
clear happen
camera or
to her in
something.
this episode,
Yeah.
and we didn't.
Yeah. So that means either they're setting her up to be something that's more aligned with Chimere. I don't know if it's a master apprentice kind of thing. Maybe it's just their allegiances are on the same side in terms of trying to bring the twins into the fold or whatever, or at least one of them.
Right.
Or if she might end up popping up like as a end credit or towards the end of this episode to where okay she could potentially be in a second season if they went that direction, like Chimera dies or whatever. Who knows? And then she's shown at the end of the episode to be set up for something like the big bad for the second season or something. Who knows? But it definitely leads to a question because she's still out there, at least to the way they make it seem within the episode. So I'm curious about that. And then, I guess I did have one question for you.
Yeah.
What did you think about the whole aspect with the Virgins and them being one conscious split into two bodies and stuff like that?
Oh. I guess I didn't really have much thought about it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't thought about it much yet, obviously, but it didn't strike me as weird or anything. I was just kind of indifferent about it, if that makes sense.
Huh. Yeah, I get that. It makes sense. I guess my thoughts lean towards what does that mean for Star Wars? Well, like what mythology does that play with? What can that determine? Is that something that's sort of in the mix with like Rey and how Palpatine kind of did his stuff to be able to make her, well, you technically make her in that sense, but you know what I mean. So it's like, will they flesh that out more in some way in the larger Star Wars universe? Because of that, and of course they mentioned the M count being super high, and that's how they kind of figured out the whole thing with them and their consciousness being split into two bodies. So I'm kind of curious more if more will be revealed in that respect about that particular thing.
Yeah, I thought it was funny, or I don't know, maybe I don't know if you noticed or thought about the fact that it was interesting that he didn't. He just called
He
it
didn't say
the M count. He didn't say the word.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, it's like
M count sounds better.
I guess, but at this point, I'm
reason.
like, whatever. Like it's canon. I mean, it's a thing. Like just say it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I guess my point being, like, the character going out of his way to say M count to me speaks volumes about like there's some decision to go, well, we're not going to have him say midichlorian. We're going to have you say
for
M
sure.
count. I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
Like,
There definitely was a decision for that because they know that people
choices were made.
Yeah, for sure. And so I guess that's and that's funny too because it's like probably one of the least things people are upset about when it comes to the show. So in any other day in show that would be the big debate and people raising their pitchforks about, but with everything else going on in the show, it's like the least thing that anyone
like,
cares
come
about.
on, we're well past caring about midichlorians. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I've got nothing else. I've got to think a lot more about it. But no, my quick reaction again I was not very happy with what I was watching. I mean, we had talked about the fact that it sounded like this was going to be a flashback. So the whole flashbackness of it all was fine. I guess I was just expecting as much. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'll just sound like a broken record. I guess I've said all I had to say. I wasn't a big fan of this one, but I'm just happy to be moving on to the finale in a week, and we're going to wrap this up. And I would say if I had to make a prediction, I would venture to guess my 5 out of 10 review won't budge much. It'll probably remain about a 5 out of 10. Some pretty miraculous things I think would have to happen in the finale for it to elevate the show much for me at this point. So, which is a bummer because I thought the show was really promising to start.
Yeah. I mean, I would say you're probably right in that it'd be hard. You'd be hard pressed to think that it's going to dramatically get better in the final episode compared to what we've gotten so far. That all of a sudden that last episode kind of knocks it out of the park for everything else that it's been doing.
Right. Well, with that, we're going to wrap things up. As always, we'd love to hear from you guys. What did you think of this episode of The Acolyte? And what are your thoughts? You can let us know by reaching out to us on Instagram and Twitter at Flickr_effect. Or if you're watching us here on YouTube, please leave a comment or question down below. We'd love to hear from you. With that, I'm Dave Lott.
I'm Bobby Jackson.
Thanks for listening and watching, everybody. Bye-bye.
See ya.